Hey, this is Ken from 111. I'm back, part two. Sifting for quality. The part about sifting for quality on cultivars is tough because ideally you really have to keep a copy, meaning that you run your population. Say we've got 100 plants, so we run out 100 plants that we've already sexed from seed. We determine that these are female. We run that 100 lot. A lot of times, the idea is to regrow the plants after we harvest. But the truth is, some plants really are tough to vegetate and get them back. And that's really dependent on latitude in terms of where it comes from. So the farther that you are from the equator, the harder it is for that plant to revert. It does not want to go backwards at all because it's the opposite of its life cycle survival plan. Whereas plants that are closer to the equator, genetically speaking, meaning that they still carry the predominant gene from those lower latitudes, 0 to 20, those things come back pretty quick. So once you flip them, they take a long time to flower, but they come back fast. So those plants, when you test them, you can recover those. But with plants that are more, 30 up to 60, the extreme, and everything really is like the 40, we're at 39 here in Humboldt, sometimes they're tough to come back, and you end up losing the plant. And so really what you want to be able to do is keep some copy of it in some capacity. The ability to hold a clone. And that's why when you see some of these massive operations and they're running 300,000 plants and they're doing these huge sifts, they're not sifting for quality. They're sifting for quantity, ease of production, resistance, and after that, they pick the one that's pretty good from there. Because there's no way they're holding that many copies back and then testing 200,000 different varietals. It's not a flower. See, when you're talking about genetics, we always talk about like Luther Burbank. And Burbank was an extremely intelligent breeder and master sifter. And he was working these, huge 100,000 populations. But he wasn't sifting for experience. He was sifting for visual. He was sifting for smell. He was sifting for weight. He was sifting for resistance. He did everything correct in every form, but he wasn't doing it with cannabis. And cannabis doesn't apply that same criteria to the end user, where it could do everything you wanted it to be, but when the person smokes it, he spits it out and says, hey. So what's the point? So for a quality sift, for getting something that you really want, you have to be able to hold all the cultivars in form, meaning a copy. And that's why it's sometimes better to work small populations. So say for the home grower, you have, 4 lights, and each light you're going to run approximately 25 plants. That gives you 100 plants. So if you went through 100 plants every couple months, and you kept the outliers that you just thought were incredible from that cluster, and you worked the same cluster over the course of a year, you could theoretically do, like, say, 6 runs, right? If there were 60-day runs. That means you'd have the ability to really look at 600 plants over the course of a year. And from that 600, you'd be able to have the top 10 that you chose from all of that sifting. And then you run that 10 against themselves, and then now you can really determine your true winner depending on how you're quantifying winner. But in this case, we're talking experience. How does the user enjoy the flower? And in the quality department still has to match up with resistance, meaning that it has an ability to handle the problems that you face indoor, which is primarily insects. Your environmental control is pretty good inside if you have infrastructure, meaning you have the ability to cool the air so that it's not too hot. You have the ability to dry the air so it's not too moist. You have the ability to moisten the air so it's not too dry. And you have adequate lighting to suit the cultivar you're using. Adequate lighting to suit the cultivar you're using means that some plants are exceptionally light hungry. And OG is a good example. And then some plants are not light hungry. And Girl Scout Cookie would be a good example, where Girl Scout does better under diffuse lighting. It does better under higher fixture heights. It does better with a lower light intensity in general. And so those are two plants that are in a huge production and huge cyclical working across the world. But they have 2 different radical needs. OG needs as much light as possible. Girl Scout Cookie takes a lot less. So a 600 over a cookie gives you an incredible, we're going to use like just numbers for comparison. A 600 over a cookie gives you a stunning cookie. 1,000 over an OG does the same job. So you still have to sift for all these characteristics you're seeking, but we have the ability to go for quality first, and then we build the quality population, and then from the quality population we pull the survivability population. From the survivability population, quality population, it gives us that Venn diagram, that center in the middle where they work. That workability is reality. So it has the quality we want coupled up with the survivability. Commercial is the opposite. It's production capability, survivability, then quality, because it's impossible to determine the quality on thousands and thousands and thousands of plants, because you got to consume it. And so I'm someone who judges cannabis for cups, and I can probably go. I mean, I can go through a lot in a single day, but there's not that many people that have been really blazing this much reefer for that many years that can kind of keep track of what it is they're looking for while they're doing it. And I'm not saying I'm the only one, because I'm not. I got a lot of friends that are highly skilled and have very educated palates and the ability to ascertain, is this something that really has a lasting quality and a penetrating quality, one that will move through a market, one that will really be able to last the duration of time. The test of time is what we're talking about. Will it be around in a couple years? Will other people enjoy it like you? And is it something that's workable? And so if you can keep these populations smaller and work them in cycles, you end up having a lot more accuracy. And part of the sifting process with testing cannabis is to be able to make sure that you keep the experience the same. So if you smoke flower with your best friend that you haven't seen in 10 years, and even if it's regular weed, you're going to go, God damn, this is some good grass. Because you're hanging out with somebody you like. And the experience is positive, and you feel good, and you're smoking, and you're like, hey, this is enhancing what I'm doing. But if you were to have that same flower, and you were in not such a positive situation, you might not have the same opinion of it. And so what you do is you standardize what you do. And for me, the easiest way to do it was to do it at the house in the morning when I first woke up. So if I'm really testing, I can really only honestly test a single flower a day for the full picture. Now I can compare and I can move through and judge for competition purposes, but for the ability to sift a cultivar that's going to work for time, what I want to be able to do is standardize my experience, and that just means that I consume it with the same conditions every time. So I wake up in the morning, I set myself up to where I'm going to have a good hour of some kind of peace, and I fire it up. And then it lets me, hang on, sweetie, my daughter's coming in. Thank you, baby. You can come by. And it allows us to standardize the experience so that we can take out that variable. And that variable of experience of what's going on around influences radically our perception of the flower. And so if I standardize what I do, I consume it at the same time, I consume it through same smoking methodology, right? Whatever one we prefer. Then I kind of get rid of all those excessive variables in this sifting equation, and then I can really take a look at it. And so if you're talking 100 plants, you can only do 60 over the course of a month if you're really doing it this way. You could do 2 a day if you smoked one in the morning, let yourself come down, and then you standardize the afternoon experience. But it's tough to standardize afternoons. Evenings possible, but it pushes you into a later part of your day where you're a little bit more wary, not as bright. And so these numbers that we're talking about take time. There is I usually don't see people go through this. Like I go through it, and I was online taking a look, and I want to say crew out of Oregon, maybe the Doghouse, where they were doing a Doctor Who or a head doctor. They were doing a sift, but they were doing it the right way. They had 60, 70 different phenotypes and the expressions off the genotype that they in their environment, and they tested it 1 per day, and then they had kept all the stocks in a hold, so they could go back and actually pull out the champion cultivar. A lot of times, the champion cultivar for quality is not the one that you would have selected in the production process because it was lower yielding, wasn't as vigorous. But as long as it wasn't hyper prone to molds and hyper prone to mildews and hyper prone to insect, then with a little bit of extra effort, what you end up having is some super quality cannabis. And those processes that do that take time. And so when I saw them sifting online, I was impressed, because it was a very methodical go through of what is the best quality. And I think more than any other place in America, you see that in Oregon, because Oregon is so loaded with cannabis right now. I'm talking 1 million extra pounds in the legal system that you can go online, you can go to auction houses and get indoor pounds for 100 and outdoor for 35. So if it isn't stunning cannabis, that stuff is basically hay. So what you're seeing is a really different way of looking at cannabis in Oregon, because they have a very good craft culture and they have some highly skilled cultivators and people that really, really are about making sure that they can survive in a very, very difficult market. And that difficult market is one that's overproduction. And so the sifting process that group was going through, it just impressed me, because it was the only one that really makes sense if you're trying to get the user to buy it twice. It's great if you can produce bulk pot. It's great if it looks incredible. It's great if it has all this incredible trichome coverage, so everybody on Instagram takes 40 pictures of it and puts it on their wall. But you smoke that stuff and it doesn't satisfy you, you're not going to buy it again. You don't care who else is smoking it. And so these sifting processes make such a big difference. And the same thing, though, is that they're sifting cannabis for their specifics. So they're sifting it for whatever works in their production methodology, meaning organic base or hydroponic base, what kind of lighting systems, and the infrastructure they have, meaning the tools they have to control the environment. So they have the ability to work with the humidity situation, swings up and down, holding it in optimal temperature ranges, and the ability to repeat that process over and over, so that when they do the sift and they find the outlier that they want, they really found something that they'll be able to use that same technology and produce. And over time, a lot of these cultivars that we work with will be able to mark like this. And I use the word cultivar all the time. Cultivar just means cultivated variety. It means out of a selection process, you chose a plant you were going to utilize for your work. People use the word strain a lot. Strain really is more about a line. What's the genetic base of it? Cultivar is the selected plant from that line that we're using to make our production cannabis. And so as we start to utilize some of these tools, like with Phylos Bioscience, where we're marking it on DNA, I mark all these plants that I mess around with so that I can kind of keep track of what they are. And then I can make sure that when someone else is using something, we can find out, is it the same plant? Because what they can do now is they can use all the work that I've done prior to sift, where they can say, hey, Kev, how did you sift this plant? And we'll use an example of an outdoor variety. But it's a good one because it's used so heavily indoor here too, which is Royal Kush. So Royal Kush was originally sorted outdoor by a guy named Mandel, and he did it in Mendo, and he did it kind of close to the coast, and it was exceptionally fungal resistant with unbelievable terp signature and beautiful potency too. I mean, it was just an A+ champ plant, and it shines in a cooler environment. And so when people run the Royal indoor, it gives them incredible flowers. But they can take a look and find out, hey, the sifting was done outside on the coast, and therefore it likes it a little damper and a little cooler. And that damper cooler allows that terp just to really come off. And if you run it in a hotter, drier room, you turn that signature way down. So it's still incredible cannabis, and the numbers are hot and the terps are hot. But the highly volatile, delicate ones just aren't present. And so much of the sifting process is to catalog what did you sift and what was the environment and the conditions that you did it in. And when you do that, you create a database that lets other people benefit from the sifting process. And now you can actually get that plant into a larger production. Not just you, but other people can cultivate it and get the qualities and get the market to accept and believe that it is what it is. So we're coming up on 15 again. So I'm going to drop this. I'm going to pop up the next piece, and we're going to get into sifting outdoor.